meeting. We're grateful for those who've been able to come down and join us in person today. We have some good energy in the room, and always for all of you who are able to join us online. I'm going to take just a minute, personal privilege, to recognize our own Emily Ng, who's graduated with her degree from the University. We're very excited for her, especially because she's going to go to grad school, which means she'll stay with us for some time.
10 more years.
Forever.
Studying something completely unrelated to what I do here. But yes, I'll stick around.
Good. Great to have you. So let's go ahead and scroll down.
1 second. So I'm trying to get to final Nearpod link because everyone needs to get on Nearpod today for real.
We do have a couple of visitors that will be with us today,
Really big
and some engagement opportunities. We'll be seeking feedback from you. So we're excited about that as well.
Sorry about that. Don't mean to have a problem.
First slide, and those of you who are joining probably have this on your computer anyway, is just a reminder to our learning intentions, the success criteria, and an invitation that Kim is, I'm sure, putting into the meeting chat to join the Nearpod.
There you go.
It's bad.
All right. On the third slide is my quote of the month, and this one comes from experience that I had. That was about 2 months ago that this author came to Utah State University. Governor Cox, our governor, was there as well, and they spoke together in the afternoon. My daughter, who's a student, was able to hear this author speak to students earlier in the day, and then I was privileged to be there to hear her and Governor Cox talk about the need for people to be able to communicate with each other and to reduce some of the hostility that exists in our world. From her book, I just took this as one of the statements that she made, and it's just, I like it because, again, it focuses on the importance of relationships. Relationships are really important for us in our lives and in our communities and our families, and to make sure that we focus on that in the work that we do and take that into consideration, especially when we have times of disagreement or have times where we have to be clear and share news sometimes that people don't want to hear. Let's go to the next slide. So recently completed, we've talked about this before with this group. There's interest in our board, some interest in a single SIS, statewide SIS system. The board discussed that in their meeting and directed staff to develop a legislative funding request for the 2025 general session. So it's just in the pipeline. Our board is, this is the time of year that they're considering legislative requests for 2025. In fact, this Friday, staff have a deadline to submit any needs from the field that have been forwarded through the different channels of communication for their consideration. The Finance Committee will begin that process in their board meeting in June, and then this request will come back with the board's overall request in August to determine whether they're going to prioritize that. They were very clear that they don't have interest in moving on with a single SIS if the state legislature doesn't intend to provide funding for that initiative. Something that you may want to track, though, as you go forward. I think there's probably strong feelings about going to a statewide SIS system in various LEAs, and so just a note to monitor that. It does, again, have an impact on state assessment because it would allow us to have real-time updates to our rostering systems if that's the direction that's chosen to go. Go to the next slide. Just not a lot happening with our board and state assessment related rules. We have the assessment to achievement. During the last legislative session, the legislature allotted additional $5 million to that program. Some of you on this call participate. In fact, many of you have or do participate in the assessment to achievement. We have a contract amendment to exercise that additional $5 million. We expect that will be to our board in their August meeting. ACT, we always, or annually, we update the contract with them, the description of services. We also had a procurement. They were bought out by a larger investment company. I think we've talked briefly about that before, which requires us to take action on the contract. Nothing substantial. to that action related to your experience with ACT, though. The English language proficiency, or the WIDA, that contract expires at the end of this upcoming school year. So we'll be going through a procurement process. We'll start that in the fall. We expect that we'll do a sole source, and high probability we'll maintain that same assessment system or same vendor moving forward. Go to the next slide. APAC agenda next week is our Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee meeting. Some of the key items we'll be discussing there is PEEP. This last legislative session, there was changes to our preschool entry exit profile requiring us to be able to calculate growth. That's triggered a series of activities, and we'll present that information to our Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee. We'll update them on the reading and Utah Aspire Plus studies that are both in the early stages. The reading one is scheduled to be completed by August 1st, and then the UA Plus study will be hopefully completed by the end of November. We'll talk a little briefly about the opportunity for an innovative assessment demonstration authority to a submission that could be the state board if we decide to move forward with that. We would submit that in the fall window. And then Scott Ross Kelly's been working, our assessment team here as well, and our science team in teaching and learning to develop science performance assessments. And we'll give them an update on the status of that work as well. So before we go to the next presenter, I'll just pause if there's any questions for the information that I've presented to this point. Okay. All right. We'll turn the time over to Director Sarah Wibke for her time with us today. Thank you for joining us.
We put the Nearpod link in the chat because this is very interactive. We have 7 collaborative boards you're going to be reviewing information, and so I told her I'd back her up on the Nearpod. And right now we only have 30 people in the Nearpod. And for the people who are in person, would you guys log in as well so that we can get your feedback, because we're going to be collecting all the feedback on collaborative boards so that they can add to the document for the technical manual. So we need everybody in the Nearpod. So the link is in the chat, and people will copy and paste it a couple more times for people who aren't in yet. But we need everybody in the Nearpod before Sarah gets started, because you're going to be spending about the next 25 minutes in Nearpod doing some collaborative work at least. So,
Thank you, Darren and Kim. For those who have known me in former positions at USPE, no, this is not about literacy this time, or kindergarten or preschool. So I'm in a new role. In case you didn't hear, I'm the director of the Center for Continuous School Improvement here at USPE. So I'm still here, just on a different floor. So happy to be here and see lots of old friends here today. It's really wonderful. We really appreciate your willingness to give us feedback on this. So what we've done is we've worked as a team to review the Utah Accountability Tech Manual, and specifically the school improvement section, and say, how can we make this a little more clear and concise? So it's really consumable to all of you, as you are our main audience for this specific document. So what we're requesting today is your feedback on the draft that we've completed to hopefully make it better. You'll obviously let us know if that's true or not. But the main goal is we want to make sure that it's information that you need, and that it's in a nice structure for you, the organization is good, and that it's clear and concise. There is a link there to the draft. I'll give everyone just a moment to click on the draft, which is in the Nearpod, or the slides, whichever you're in, potentially both.
maybe to be able to do them in the chat also, maybe. What? No, we need them in the Nearpod. We're not putting the link in the chat.
Understood.
The link is not going in the chat. You can go to we need your feedback in Nearpod, guys. I will be the Nearpod Nazi today. I promised Sarah we would have a really good way to get feedback from everyone. So we got 55 people in, so we're doing better.
Yay, that's wonderful.
We have 91 on Zoom.
Oh, 91 on Zoom. So we're
The link, do I have to go to Zoom to find one?
You can just go to Nearpod,
And then the
and then
code's on the screen.
when you sign into Nearpod, you go into this code 4SNV6.
it's up here on the screen. I can barely see what.
I'll show you.
It's 4S and NC6. Is that in Nearpod? Just go to.
I just thought you'd seen the last. Oh, that's full stuff. You said, yeah.
Yep, okay. We're at 64.
Kim's pressure is working.
Not my first year bug Ruby.
All right, was everyone able to get into the link and Nearpod? I'm seeing some nonverbal feedback, which is super helpful. Thank you. Okay, great. So I want to sort of walk you through the organization of the section or how it's organized now. And of course, we're open to feedback on that as well. Specifically, we started with just a couple paragraphs, a really brief introduction, and then we move into federal school improvement programs, which there are 3, TSI, ATSI, and CSI. And then we also moved into state school improvement programs, which would be Elevate and Springboard. And then at the final section is the timeline. Within each of the 5 designations, federal and state, we also included a very brief statement on what it is, and then the entry criteria step by step, and then the exit criteria step by step. So that's sort of the organization. So you'll see that parallel structure going throughout the draft when you're looking at it. So just want to bring your attention to that specific organization. And let's head to the next slide. So what we'd like you to do is start with we're going to do this in sections, a total of 7. It won't take that, or maybe it was 8, I can't remember, 7 or 8. But what we want to do is get your feedback on each section on a different Collaborate board, so that way we can actually take the specific feedback and address it in that specific section when we revise. So section 1 is just the introduction. Like I said, it's only the first 2 paragraphs on the very first page of that document. And it's right under, it says Chapter 4, Federal and State School Improvement Designation, Entry and Exit Criteria. So if you'll just take a couple minutes to review those first 2 paragraphs, the introduction, and give us feedback on the Collaborate board.
So Sarah, you're talking about chapter 4, the chapter provides additional information.
Yes. Yep. Thank you for asking.
And just for clarification, this will replace Chapter 4 in the current Accountability Technical Manual. This is an expansion of the definitions for federal and state school improvement. We want to give you clear entry and exit criteria, as well as definitions for those categories, because we understand that those acronyms sound like, I don't know, salad. So
Somebody said, within each indicator, where are the indicators listed? I think you've already went through that. The indicators are going to be listed throughout the document. This is the introduction. So somebody who asks a question, where are the indicators listed, you're going to see them within, as you keep continuing to give feedback. So that's where they are. And if somebody gives feedback, as we usually do with collaborative boards, if you're reading it and you go, oh, that was what I was going to say, feel free to click the heart and you don't have to type so much. So. Somebody asks, is there a way you can see the Title I cut score?
Great question. So in the introduction, we probably wouldn't put that, but within the different sections where we talk about the Title I cut score, that would be a great place to give feedback as to exactly what you want that to look like. Does anyone need more time for the first two paragraphs? All right, let's move to the second section then. The second section is the beginning of the federal school improvement programs. Specifically, we're going to start with TSI, which means targeted support and improvement. This section begins in the middle of page 1 and goes through the middle of page 2. So it's a full page of information, but it's just half on page 1, half on page 2. So we're going to give you a little bit more time than we did for the last two paragraphs to go through that specific section and provide feedback on that one section. And again, it's just the TSI, targeted support and improvement section.
Here, our Title I schools rank order. Entire population of our student group. Something we're just listening back. Students feedback. Scores going to be changed this year to the benchmark criteria. Scores going to be changed this year to the benchmark.
That might be.
Because then Katie Ann's reading.
So for the question about,
Cut scores.
the question about, are the cut scores going to be changed this year Oh, yep, okay, you got it. Never mind. I will stop then.
Okay.
So Sarah, I'm assuming there's probably an example of chapter 2, how that works, because I think for a lot of people, that's very technical. Right?
Yes, this is all really good feedback that we can use to enhance the entire section and all the sections really. And as far as the question about the deadline to exit, that's where the timelines come into play, which is the last section. But again, we'll take feedback as to if you, I know feedback we had heard previously was they wanted the timeline all in one area. So if you want it in 2 areas or what you want that to look like, we're open to adjusting the organization as well. So we're happy to make those changes if it's more feasible to digest in certain areas or a certain organization.
Chapter 2. Separation of remote enclosures. What? No. There's a comment about it would be helpful to have SGP earlier than in the middle of the fall. Does anybody want to speak to SGPs and why they would come in the fall? Karen?
But because we, obviously we can't run the SGP calculations on demand like we can do a student achievement scores on demand. So there's a process of processing all the assessment data, applying the accountability rules, calculating SGPs as part of that process. So we're working on expediting that and trying to get our reporting in the data gateway and SURF files back to you much earlier than we have before. But I can say we'll never have, the way we do SGPs will never be on demand like we can do student scores.
I don't think we disagree that it would be great to have it earlier. Just to be clear.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that wouldn't be great, it would.
If it was standard spaced, you could do it. Just saying.
Okay, let's move to the next section. All right, so section 3 is moving into ATSI, which is additional targeted support and improvement. This section begins right where you ended, so the middle of page 2 and goes through the middle of page 3. So again, it's about a page worth of information. And so we'll give you about the same time to read through that and then provide feedback. And I love that some of your feedback actually will help multiple sections in improvement. So thank you for adding those. We appreciate it.
So what is
All right, does anybody need more time on section 3 before we move on to section 4? No. Let's move on to section 4. This is, full disclosure, this is the largest section because it's CSI, which is comprehensive support and improvement. So because there are 3 pathways of entry and 3 pathways to exit CSI, it's going to be a little bit more reading. So bear with us. We're going to give you more time for this section because it is a little bit trickier. It begins in the middle of page 3, right where you left off after ATSI, and it goes through the middle of page 6. So 3 full pages. We're going to give you about 3 times the amount of time, but just know that there are 3 CSI pathways. So this section is organized within those 3 ways to enter CSI support. The first one is low performance, the second one is low graduation rate, and the third one is low performing student groups, which means that the school or student groups did not exit from ATSI, and so they're moving into CSI as the next level of support. I'll go ahead and give you some time to review those 3 pages. For those who made the comment about alternative high schools, I want you to know we're actually having those exact same conversations internally about how that should or should not be working. So know that we hear you, and we've already started those kinds of conversations because we agree there's some wonkiness in that space that we need to adjust. So we appreciate you giving us that feedback to know we're on the right track. Thank you.
Anybody need more time?
More time? All right, let's give you some more time. Can you give me with appropriate fingers about how much time you need? We're only using appropriate fingers here, folks.
That's funny when Sarah says that, she taught the littles. I had to say that. I got little school.
I'm trying to teach my 5-year-old about that. How do you do the number one correctly? Yeah.
Does everyone feel like 2 more minutes would be appropriate? Oh, you're good? Everyone good? You good? Okay, all right, let's go to the next section. So section 5, we're moving away from the federal school improvement requirements and designations to the 2 state school improvement designations. The first one is Elevate, which is an opt-in. It's not a required designation. It's just schools apply to opt in and be part of that cohort. So this section begins, it's much shorter. It begins in the middle of page 6 and goes through the top of page 7. So it's less than a full page, so we'll probably give you about the least amount of time to review this section. But again, just wanted to reiterate that Elevate is an opt-in program. Does anyone need more time? Section 6, Springboard School. So this is our other state designation. It starts right where you left off, but right near the top of page 7, it goes through page 8, so it is a little bit longer. I look forward to your feedback in this space because we haven't actually started Springboard yet, so you're probably wondering, well, what is it even? So I look forward to your feedback on this one. Thank you. We have a question on the board right now about, in the Elevate section, what constitutes successful completion for exit? Do you simply need to participate for 4 years, or are there specific data points that must be met? Since it is an opt-in voluntary program, it's just completion of the actual program. There aren't any teeth in it, at least not in code or rule. So at this time, it is just see the program. Maybe that's a reason to opt in. Are we ready for the next one? Okay, great. All right, this is the last one, and it's very brief because it's just a table. So this is just the school improvement timelines. If you'll just review the table and give us any feedback, and the feedback could be what's included in the table, how it's organized, where it falls within the chapter, and any and all. That would be great. And if you have any overall feedback that you have, just if you'll put overall feedback, so I know it's not specifically addressed to the table, that would be really helpful too. Anyone need more time for this last little table? Great. Thank you so much for giving us really specific feedback and for people hearting it or adding on to the conversation to make the feedback even stronger. We really appreciate that, and we will come back together and make it better for you all. So thank you so much for helping us to make it better. We appreciate you taking the time, a lot of time, to do some hard cognitive work this morning and help us out. So thank you so much.
Okay. I just have a couple little things. First of all, here is the assessment and accountability task calendar. I only put it through June because I know nobody wants to start thinking about what we have to do in July yet, as we're trying to get through June. So this is the one through June. A couple things, because we knew we were going to spend a lot of time doing the school improvement. I wanted to thank everybody, as we have been endeavoring to get through the over 500 alert papers we had this year. We had 200 more than last year. I want to give a special shout out to Gary Twitchell, who had the most. He has had more than 50 already, and sometimes he got 10 in one day. And so those of you who get those, you know how tough that is. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work that we're all doing to keep our students safe, as frustrating as it is. And there were so many that occasionally I actually sent the wrong one to the wrong person, and it was a lot. So between Emily, myself, and Maureen, it's been a lot. It's been quite a thing. But I just wanted to thank everyone because there is a lot. Another quick reminder, our Building Connections is on track for September 12th, which is Thursday, September 12th, from 8:30 to noon. The 8:30 time, it's 8:30 to 9, so we can get everybody logged in. This year, we are hoping everybody will be in person just like last time, but specifically, and Ben, I'm looking at you because this is for you, we're going to let districts or some of our virtual schools who absolutely cannot be in person with everyone, we're going to let you reserve a breakout room, so that we know you're going to be in breakout room number 1, and that's where you're going to go when it comes time to go in. That's not giving everybody, the entire group, an out to say, fine, we'll just do everything virtual. Please stay in person. It was really valuable. We got really good feedback from people who actually got to be in the same room with your curriculum directors, your SPED directors. And it's up to you who you want to invite. It's really intended for district level personnel, so you can decide who needs to know more about everything assessment for the whole year. So if you remember, we talk about deadlines, we talked about specific highlighting of certain assessments, any really big changes that would affect everyone, all of those kind of things will be highlighted. We will discuss all the trainings, testing dates, all of that gives you a chance to communicate and talk in person so that you can see each other and actually make plans. And anecdotally, as the assessment staff on the system side, we really feel like it helped. We had fewer missed deadlines this year.
Maureen, I think you're up.
Yep, it looks like, I just have a few notes about data cleanup and rostering. We go to the next slide. Alrighty, so data cleanup. If you didn't finish Utah Aspire Plus, I'm sorry, it ended yesterday. I am right smack dab in the middle of doing state data validation for WIDA. So if you have found out you have a couple of students who maybe have dual reports or are missing results that you expect to see there, just send me an email and I can check it out for you. Upcoming RISE data validation is June 11th and June 12th. So if you start putting in your participation codes now, June 12th won't be such a scary date for you. All righty. In the next month or so, I'm going to be making updates to the rostering manual and our core code list. You can look for some updates to the Acadians rostering business rules since we're switching over to ALO for reading. Also, we are going to be making slight changes to the WIDA business rules. Just we're going to try to catch those students who are fluent that maybe still sneak in for WIDA testing. We're going to be updating the core code list for Acadians reading. We're going to be taking a few core codes off, mostly science and math core codes that are on the Acadians reading core codes list. Also, there's a couple new core codes for Apple testing coming up. We can go next. People have asked for this timetable of when we do data exchanges with our assessment vendors, so I've just put it here. I also have shared it out with your IT people at the spring data meeting. I've sent it along to them as well. And that is about it for rostering. I promise the end is near. We're so close. We're so close to being done for this year. Well, we can do it. And that's it for me.
Question?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Maybe it's more for Darren. We were victimized by our own mistake. And there's a fail-safe I wish we could get. And that is if there's an issue with the Utrecht file, I would like the vendors to use the previous date's file. But my understanding is that is not a requirement. So my humble request is that it's a requirement that if it falls below some level, you need to revert to the most recent effective student file in these different data systems. It's a simple fail-safe. It's very common. But it didn't exist for Pearson and Aspire when we had our mistake. Their fail-safe didn't work.
Because when for Utrecht bumps all the kids out overnight, which can happen, the next day none of our kids are testing.
That's unacceptable.
And that's, at least
Yeah.
during the testing window, that can be a real problem because sometimes that's just something we move, sometimes it's just Utrecht that lets that happen.
But on every one of those lines up there, the previous line, I like the fail-safe to go to the previous year's data that was acceptable.
Previous day.
Yes, there. Yeah, something, there's a 10 or 20% change in roster for a given district, it would be good if that was just a hold to say, hey, let's make sure that's right before we go and remove all the kids.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, like it won't run if it happens. So
If
there's
it's that many to change.
so that's my request.
I know that there are fail safes for all of you. If something happens to the entire state and they find a certain percentage of students not coming through, then they will stop. At
It's
least
not
for
at the
Campion.
district level.
It's not at district level. And I know Cliff has spoken to our vendors about that, but I'm not sure if we can go up down to a district level.
Yeah, we can certainly advance that request through our regular meetings with our vendors, though, determine certainly the ones that we manage directly.
Yeah.
Which is large statewide assessment.
Well, I think it would be something we have to put, so for example, right, let's say someone goes in and all your 1% flags get removed. Right, that pushes through, it's gonna exit every kiddo, right, out of DLM, which exits every single one of your rosters, which happens, right, and it happens. So I think we've tried to bring this up, but I think we have to get it implemented.
I know there's discussion every time
I don't know if
something
it's
happens,
contract
there's
issues.
discussion.
It just seems like
Vendors about that.
we should be able to protect from a disaster, but not just at the state level. It was our mistake, but I'm like, why didn't you just keep the current file that was working? And the answer was, well, we couldn't. We don't have that program.
Well, it's set up on business rules, right? So like, that's the way.
It's a programmer doing the right thing for the math system.
Yeah, we'll certainly advance that request as we work
appreciate
with the vendors through the summer.
I would want to pick and choose between them, but you probably have the priority list.
Yeah.
But it was rough.
Yes, and it does cost you a lot of time when that happens. You have students ready to test. You have to wait 24, 48 hours.
Thank you.
Cost.
Okay, on to DLM, Dynamic Learning Apps. Go ahead. Okay, so as of, I don't know, Kim. Oh, what's wrong?
Trying to get mine to shut the door.
Oh, okay. This was, I don't know, Tuesday, Wednesday, these were our numbers. So I had about 150 students in the system beginning of the week that were still not sitting on a roster. So not bad out of the 4,000 something students we get in DLM. About 197 kids were still missing that first contact survey, which is required for testlets to deliver. We had about 88% of our required testlets for the students rostered completed, and we're sitting around 40% of those tips access pages being accessed. So that is a new data extract right this year. There's still a few nuances with DLM, so we're working on kind of cleaning that up a little bit to try to get a better picture of what our teachers are doing accessing that. But it's a good start to be able to look at that. Okay, go ahead. Okay, what counts as a participant? So I think this is a good one. I'm getting lots of questions, or as I've been going out and doing some monitoring and observations around DLM, teachers kind of still not understanding like, hey, I've completed a couple testlets, mom had a family emergency and Johnny's not coming back. How do we code the rest of our testlets not completed? So upon completing one testlet per subject, a student's considered a participant. They check that box, they will actually get delivered a score report. Okay, that score report may be based upon answering 3 questions to determine a proficiency level, so it's not going to be valid or reliable, right? So as students complete up to that maximum number of required testlets, right, you become more valid in what that score report is. But one testlet, they're a participant, there's nothing you have to do. Does that make sense? So if there are still lingering testlets in there, do not go out of participation code, right? Because we don't want to override that participation. Does that make sense? Okay. Special circumstance codes. So back to my 150 students not rostered. So I still am getting a few questions about entering parent opt-out or any of those participation codes. DLM calls them special circumstance codes. Again, the teacher, you have to roster the students to a teacher. The teacher has to complete the first contact survey because you have to get that first testlet delivered, and that's where you go in to test management, right, under that testlet and enter those participation codes, and you have to enter them per subject. So there is a DLM, I don't know what my next slide is. There is a special circumstance TA document that is on that district Padlet for you. When you enter that special circumstance code in that drop-down menu, there's kind of false advertising. There's that blue save button at the bottom right part of the page. What you actually need to click is that like old floppy disk icon save button next to the special circumstance drop-down menu. That's what saves that code for you. So there is a TA document that has been provided to enter those special circumstance codes. Again, just kind of your checklist. So before you look like our Mr. Cat here and head to the beach for summer, if you can deactivate, remove any users in there that you know shouldn't be, when the system rolls over in July, they'll pull in all those active users. So the more we can have our data cleaned up would be great. You know, go in and you can run a data extract to figure out which one of your students don't have, they're not sitting on a roster, or that they don't have that first contact survey. So you can contact that teacher if you need to, but you've got a rostering extract in there that you can go look that up. I think it's called student rosters and first contact survey, if I'm correct, Maureen. That's the one we use. So make sure those are all done. Make sure all of your kiddos have that, those special circumstance codes in if need be. And I think that's about it. For that, the window closes June 7th, June 6th, June 7th, whatever that Friday is. And so like when that window closes, you don't have like an extra week to do data cleanup, right? Teachers can finish testing on the same day that you have to finish getting all of your stuff in. That window closes, the window closes. I've been getting a lot of questions about score reports too. When will this year's score reports be available? August. They will be in the system. It's usually like August 1st, but that first week of August, when everybody comes back in the fall, you will have all of your DLM score reports will be loaded. Remember, your teachers don't have access to those until you roster students. So at the district level, you guys have it, right? Anybody with the district coordinator, district user, whoever you've got doing that will have access to those, and you have the same policy that rolls with any other assessment. You need to get those out. Okay, so figure out how you get those into teachers' hands. I recommend to our teachers and special ed directors, a good time to sit down and go through that is either first parent-teacher conferences or if they have an IEP in the fall. To use that, but your teachers are starting to ask, so I'm telling them that they will be in your hands come August, so I'm directing them back to you. Okay, let me know if you have any questions.
All right, WIDA, short and sweet today. There is a webinar coming up on the 21st, so next week, to let you know about even more enhancements coming your way in AMS. Just remember that these are always recorded, so if you can't make it to the live webinar, it's recorded. You can access that in your WIDA Secure Portal account, but, more enhancements, hopefully more user-friendly in AMS. All right, so reports, you've all been getting your reports. As Maureen said, we are in our state validation window right now for WIDA access. Lots of you have been reaching out to merge reports, get things corrected for your access reports. We have till the 29th, I believe, to get those done. And just as one thing to note is if you have requested a correction for your access reports, you will not see the new reports posted in AMS until the 11th of June. Okay, so I think there was a little misunderstanding. It's not on the 29th when those are actually going to be available. They will be available on the 11th. Okay, and then just another subtle reminder about alternate access, since there's standard study taking place for that new assessment. Those are not available until the fall. All right, firm but friendly emails went out. So if you were missing any materials, you got a list of what was missing, and please make sure that you look around for them. I've gotten a lot of emails saying we sent everything back. Even if it wasn't in the right bag, it was in a different box, everything gets scanned, so somehow it will get accounted for. If it's missing, then it really is missing and something happened. You just need to fill out the accountability form in AMS saying, even if you believe you returned it, just say, we do not have that. We believe we returned it. It just does somehow need to be accounted for on the accountability form in AMS. So, and just remember, if any of those late materials happen to be testing materials that would produce a student score, those are the reporting dates as well, when you could expect to get those reports for students if they have late test materials returned. And then this is just a reminder of looking ahead. We discussed the dates for next year, and materials coming earlier next year. Yay!
Yay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yay! that exact date, it's going to be somewhere in that first week of December.
Oh,
We'll get you the exact date as soon as we nail down our state profile. Yay! I know. We're happy to do it for you all. And then screener, again, you can start screening July 1, especially if you have those incoming kinder students where it is one-on-one test administration. It takes longer. You can get that started. Also, the training courses for test administrators, those are available earlier now. Yay! So those, you can start doing test admin trainings July 1. Please remember that screening can only be based on that home language survey. We have a lot of LEAs reaching out. I think someone's trying to get in. A lot of LEAs reaching out saying, oh, a teacher just referred them to be screened. You can't screen a student just based on a teacher referral, okay? It has to be based on the home language survey. And then as we announced last week, and I was just chatting with our IT about 15 minutes ago, we will be housing all screener data in the data gateway. They have just completed their first sprint. So the first half of the work is done. And we will have a lot more to update you on come May 30th when the next sprint is completed. So that will be attached to all student information in the data gateway. Our hope is the date they were screened, what that screener score was, if they qualified as EL, and the LEA that did the screening. So
That's great.
we're trying to make your life easier. Yay! We're very excited about all the enhancements coming your way. A question in the chat, reminder for requirement for when to give the screener. So the requirement for our state's consolidated state ESSA plan is at the beginning of the school year, you have 30 calendar days to screen a student. Again, you can get started earlier though, but it needs to be completed within the 30 first calendar days of the school year. After those 30 calendar days, it goes down to 10 school days. So if a student enrolls after those 30 calendar days, then you have 10 school days after that. Any other questions? Yay, that was quick and easy today. I heard a sign. Was that a good sign?
Okay, next slide. Just a quick update. We are in the process of revising the PEEP assessment. So just know that new materials will be available July 15th, and you will need new training for any of your preschool staff on the PEEP entry with the changes. So we will not be providing materials. Please don't go to download them before July 15th because they will not be available yet. Go ahead. And then just some information about the PEEP entry training. So there will be a Canvas course that will be available July 15th. And then I do have a couple of virtual trainings if your staff would prefer that. Next. Go ahead. Then just our end of year school leader data analysis designed for school leaders to just look at their data and think about how things have gone for the year and plan for next year. Jared and I are doing that in conjunction so it's both pro reading and math. And then there is a printing issue on the nonsense word fluency first grade end of year benchmark form. So that letter M on the fourth line is not quite printed all the way. So please share that with people, have them just take a pen and fix the M. Acadience is planning on updating those materials, but it will not be in time for this benchmark period. So I know a lot of assessments have already been given, but for those who haven't finished yet, go fix your first grade forms. Go folks. Yes. And then just a reminder about the ALO trainings, the assessment administration for any previously trained assessors on just how to administer with the ALO. Please make sure your people have a touchscreen device when they're attending that training. It is really hands-on. It is not just sit there and hear about the system. It's really go into the system and practice. So they don't have a touchscreen device. It's not very valuable. Then there's also the ALO data and reporting, really designed for LEA level staff, school leaders, and coaches, just how to use that platform. And then the essentials for any assessor new to Acadience reading or math. And I did open up some additional training sessions in June and July because things were already full and increased the numbers. So hopefully I will be checking that. If you do find that your staff can't get into trainings, please just shoot me an email. Let me know. I will increase the numbers or try and figure out additional time that I could open additional sessions. So there's just a link to the session document there as well.
There's a question.
Yeah.
What training session would you recommend classroom teachers to look at reports or data?
So my recommendation is that you plan some professional learning around looking at that platform after teachers actually have their Acadience data in the fall. So that teachers, when they're looking at it for their actual students and not just some demo data. So the data and reporting trainings, I do not have enough sessions set up if I'm training teachers as well as administrators and coaches. And so those trainings are really designed for people who are going to have to teach somebody else, and it's demo data. If you want to send teachers, I can't stop you, but I will run out of spots and I really don't have time to open up a lot of additional sessions.
And it's not as valuable looking at your.
It's not as valuable for teachers because they're not looking at their own specific data. I would definitely be open to opening up some sessions in September if you want to have teachers participate in a session where they're looking at their own personal data. But my recommendation is just doing that at that school level with the school administrator, a coach, or at the LEA level, and having teachers look at their data and then set their goals for those students. Look at the groups that need to be created for progress monitoring and at what level those students need to be progress monitored at and what measure is going to be appropriate and align with the interventions that they're receiving and show the best progress for that student. And then looking at just overall, where is my class? What maybe adjustments do I need to make to my Tier 1 instruction to best provide learning around literacy and math for students?
And then another question, who will get the original logins to add teachers?
So that is going to come to whoever is listed as your Acadience person within. So last year, when you filled out the surveys for Acadience Reading, whoever you listed as that person, they're going to be the one that's going to get that information. We do have a few LEAs that some people had changed over. They let me know that. I updated that, and we had a few that things came back, so we've reached out to different people at those specific LEAs. So you will be getting that information in June. So ALO is really hopeful to have all of their accounts created for their initial people, and this training is the training those people need to attend. So this is the ALO rostering training for district personnel who need to roster additional staff. So if you have testing teams, school administrators, district people, this is the training on how to roster those personnel. So teachers and students will roster through the state, through our state rostering, but other personnel. So there's 2 times here. We will also record one of the sessions and provide a link to that recording. And I don't have the specific Zoom link yet, So that will be provided definitely in June AD meeting, and I'll be sending it out in memos as well.
And it applies to both reading and math.
Yeah, this, as long as you're using ALO for both of them. So if you're using ADM still, then you should already know how to do that. So parent letters, there is a link to parent letters. You may use the letters as is or modify them for your LEA. And just a reminder of what is required to be included for students when you're sending home information about Acadience reading for parents.
That's it. All right, for RISE, go ahead and go to the next slide. There was an issue that replicated this year that we experienced last year as well, where students were rostering for multiple tests if the test form changed. So for example, if you had students who had started the English test and then you were adding the Spanish adaptive version to their student settings, it then showed 2 and you had to mark multiple participation codes. That is occurring again. However, CAI was able to push an update last weekend so that it is removing, I will say, what is the majority of current eligibilities that are showing up. However, I know that there are some stragglers. So if you're still seeing some of those duplicate things, reach out to me with the SSIDs of the students so that we can get CAI to remove those for you. Our window for RISE closes on June 7th. And then remember, with your cleanup, all of that is done June 12th. So for secure browser updates for RISE, June 4th, CAI will release the updates available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. There is no new iPad one that's anticipated for the upcoming school year. Chrome is still TBA. When it's released and available, I will let you know. Fancy. through the AD memo, or if we're having an AD meeting that week. But there will be communication when that becomes available. But when it is, just remember that it needs to be installed through the Google Admin Management Console. Okay. If you are in the process of moving things over, just know that CAI will still support this current year's secure browsers basically through September 1st. So you have a little bit of time to get those ready and going. When it comes to ISRs, next slide.
I do want to point out, Drew, earliest ever for the secure browser, just for you. It's a magical day.
It's a magical day.
It literally was a magical day when we pushed them and I got the earliest day possible. So there you go.
I brought this up last meeting as well, but just as a reminder, you have 3 weeks to distribute your ISRs to parents. Guidance for accessing the writing ISRs begins on page 160 of the reporting guide. As a reminder here, your students are going to have just the raw score. There's not a proficiency score with writing. There hasn't been for the last few years, but for some reason we still get questions. So just as a reminder, proficiency will not show up for writing. When it comes to your math, science, and ELA ISRs, go ahead and go to the next slide. Guidance for accessing those is included on page 169 of the RISE reporting guide, but if you still require any assistance, go ahead and reach out to me and I'm happy to help you with that. The last RISE slide I have is just a reminder that myself and the help desk are always available to you if you need anything. And with that, we can move on to Utah Aspire Plus.
We just decided not to show up.
It really doesn't like that logo. I didn't do it last time either. Black box.
It must be preoccupied by
You might be. It's so weird because it shows up everywhere else. So your student detail reports were available within 24 hours this year. I've had a lot of questions about ones that are showing up with do not report though. This is when a student doesn't complete 85% of the items as far as attemptedness goes. So just know that when you see that, that's what that means. It's not like a score was given and you've applied a 204 and you don't know why it's showing up. It's showing up because they didn't complete enough of the test to have a score generate. Your other reporting, so for example, your ISRs, the test scores file, and the test events files, those become available to you on May 29th.
There is guidance in the score interpretation guide, but again, if there's something I can help you with, please let me know. Your parent portal becomes available on June 4th. The URL is listed there. It is familyportal.pearson.com/Utah. When it comes to that parent portal, there's a few things that the parents are going to need to access the students' ISRs. First, there's the first screen that will show up is going to ask for the students' their SSID number. And then it's going to take them to a second screen and ask for more verification information, which is the last name, the first name, and the student's date of birth. Once those have been typed in, they will have access to the ISRs in that family portal area. Next slide.
There's a question online.
Will the ISR come into Atom or a separate file? There will be ISRs in Atom just as there are currently with your archived ones from previous years. But no, and I think it's on the slide that's after this one, those are unavailable through the 29th and then they're thereafter. Yes, right here. So it's under report assets. Those will be unavailable May 22nd through 29th. That would be anything that's like previous test events files, previous test scores files, all your previous archived ISRs that are listed there. Those are unavailable during that week while they upload everything else in and have it ready for you. And then after the 29th, all of that then becomes available to you once again. The ISR for Utah Aspire Plus within Atom looks identical to the ones that you've seen in the past, so it shouldn't be too tricky to navigate. Okay. If there are questions or concerns, let me know. Yes.
Is the ISR that's going to be released on May 29th, is that going to come to us as one big PDF file or individual PDF files?
They come as one big PDF file. I know that I have reached out to Pearson in the past on an individual basis for, I think there's like 2 or 3 of you that can't separate them out yourselves for whatever. I don't know how it works because I don't speak those words. But I'm happy to reach out to them again and see if they will do that for you. You just have to let me know. And with that, I think we're good. Hooray.
Hey, I have another Utah Aspire Plus question. So I know that the participation codes are done, but my question was, is there a good way to establish which students on Utah Aspire Plus have completed 6 or more items? Because that is a prerequisite for some of the codes. And in the Session Explorer, it only shows you a % completed, and of course, students might have a variable number of items, so sometimes it's really hard to tell if they've met that cutoff.
I can reach out to Kristen and see if there's a better way to show that in the Session Explorer. Where Utah Aspire Plus is fixed form with a percentage, knowing the number of items, because we do know the number of items mathematically. I mean, you can work backward, but yeah, I can definitely reach out and see if that's an option.
Well, the field test items are a range.
Yeah.
Does that factor into it, or?
For my content people, do you know if field test items play into a completion?
Yes.
All right. Books going for next year, right?
Yeah. I don't know, I think that they do on Rise.
I heard we're not.
The field test items are
The field tests aren't scored for
Yeah,
Utah
but in the
Aspire Plus.
Well, for Rise either. In the completion percentage though, as they're going, the field test items are included within the completion percent.
Visual, but as far as like scoring of completion.
You still have to have a minimum number of operational items.
Sounds like we'll need to verify that answer. to that.
Range between 0%.
It's like, I know on the steer as much. Yeah, got it. On the Rise completion. Okay.
Any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, we're
For Katie?
because we're to a point where we're going to shift to a different focus for a short period of time. We're grateful for Katie's willingness to join us today to talk about some of the changes around surveying requirements. This is a request that has come to our team through the Utah Association of Assessment Directors. And I would expect that most of you could benefit from, even if you don't have direct responsibilities for surveys in your LEAs, the information that Katie's going to share would be beneficial for you to have an understanding of. Okay, Katie.
Did you, Darren, you had said something about maybe excusing people if they feel like this is less relevant to them. Do we want to say that?
No, we want them to hear you.
Okay.
It's to everyone. It's gonna save you
They
lots of
wouldn't know when to come back.
Probably, yeah. And then I'm also like people can hear.
Yeah, that's
Okay. And who is driving?
I am.
Oh, great. Should I just reach over and? Okay, awesome. Well, hi, everyone. You can go to the next slide. By the raise of hand for people in the room, does anyone have HB 182 student survey amendments on their radar? Okay, good. Yeah, it has big implications for LEAs and may or may not affect you and your role. Anyway, just wanted to introduce myself and my team. So USBE is lucky to have not only a privacy director, but also a team of privacy people. We were just at a state conference. A bunch of us in this room were there. And it's just always striking to me to remember that, sorry, I'm setting a timer. Okay, always striking to me to remember that Utah is like a leader in the privacy space. There are very few states who have a designated privacy person at the state level and almost none that have a privacy team. So that's pretty exciting. And we love to be helpful. I was like so excited for this meeting because interfacing with people from LEAs is by far my favorite part of my job. So while I don't often interface with this group, except for like Drew, I see Drew back there. I work with Drew a lot in privacy. But I invite you to send questions to me or my team anytime something comes up, anything privacy related, including what we're going to talk about today. Okay. All right, a little bit of background on this bill. So this bill has actually been in existence since the 90s, or the law has been in existence since the 90s. So as is often the case with legislation, HB 182 amended an existing law. That's what happened here. The existing law is something that we call Utah PPRA because it's sort of Utah's version of a federal law called the Protection of People Rights Amendment, which is a privacy law. And the general gist of this existing law is that it requires LEAs or educators, employees of a school district or school to get parent consent before they ask students questions about certain information that are called protected topics. And those protected topics are listed here on the slide. Things like political affiliation. So if you're going to ask a kid, you know, what's your political affiliation, or what's the political affiliation of your family member, then you have to get parent consent first. If you're going to ask a kid about their sexual orientation, then you need to get parent consent before you do that. So kind of establishing privacy protections for students, not so much once you've already collected the information, which is what FERPA does. It protects students' information that we already possess. This law protects what you even ask of students in the first place. All right, go ahead.
There's a hand.
Oh, yes, please.
From Michelle.
Let me see if I can.
Oh, okay.
I clicked ask to unmute. But it doesn't look like it.
Type it in the chat.
That's what I said.
Having trouble with unmuting with all of the glitches. It might be easier just to type your question in the chat.
It might be the 30-second rule before she's unmuted. I don't know. Well, I'll keep going, and then when she types it in the chat,
Somebody else typed a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And a teacher asked preferred pronouns still.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that. That's actually then, are we on the next slide? Okay, yes. So, so one of the changes to the bill amends an existing law. One of the changes that the bill makes is it adds some clarity to those 8 protected topics. It used to be, oh, sexual orientation. We're clear that we cannot ask about that before getting parent consent. But there was a gray area about gender identity, including asking a student their preferred pronouns. The guidance from the Attorney General's office was, don't go there. Don't, teachers shouldn't ask students their preferred pronouns. And then this bill formalizes that and is like, yes, definitely you need to get parent consent before you ask that. This is going to be, I think, a big point of training that you'll want to do in your LEAs is just make sure that teachers know you can't do a beginning of the year survey that says, what are your preferred pronouns? That's a student, the law is clear, and this remains in place, that a student is not prohibited from volunteering information. So if a student walked up to a teacher and was like, I would go by, they, them, or whatever, those are my preferred pronouns. There's nothing that says that a student couldn't say that to a teacher, but a teacher can't solicit the information according to this bill. All right, so that's one of the new additions. Beyond that, this is where the bill is significantly different. It used to be that you needed, as I mentioned, you needed to get parent consent for those certain types of surveys about at least 2 weeks prior to administering the survey. This bill goes beyond that and says, okay, that's still true, but the legislature has also identified these 3 types of surveys that they are specifically interested in. They still want parent consent, but they want that consent to be collected at the time a student registers for school. Yeah.
That's active consent though, not passive consent.
Exactly. Active consent meaning you're not giving a parent an opportunity to opt out. They have to actively click and say, yes, I am okay with this. And then there's a notice that needs to accompany that as well, which we'll talk about in a couple slides. So the 3 surveys that are implicated here, again, you need to get parent consent at the time a student registers for school, are, I guess I should look at my slides. Okay, early surveys associated with early warning systems, surveys with social emotional learning questions, whatever that means. That one's pretty gray. That's pretty vague. And then the school climate survey, which is, I think, probably where this largely applies to many of you. Okay, on to the next one. So I'm just going to break down these 3 items for you. There's a separate bill, HB 84, the school safety amendments, that requires LEAs that you are going to be required to use an early warning system. I don't think it's going to take place until 2025. Does that sound right to Darren or anyone? Ultimately, you will need to implement a early warning system, something similar to Panorama if you're not already using one, according to that other bill. Now, if Panorama, for example, is an existing early warning system that a lot of schools use, there is a survey associated with Panorama, but it's optional. So some LEAs administer it, some LEAs don't. To be clear, simply having an early warning system does not necessarily mean that you're going to be administering surveys associated with that early warning system. So this applies to you to the extent that A, you have an early warning system, which ultimately you all will, but may not yet. And it applies to you to the extent that you administer surveys associated with that early warning system. If you do that, then you need to get parent consent for those surveys at the time a student registers for school. Any questions about that one?
There's a different question.
Yeah.
Which bill is the survey restriction bill?
This one, I think, HB 182. I guess I'm not fully understanding the question, but that's what this one is. When people talk about the survey bill, they're talking about HB 182. Yeah. Okay, great. So next one, surveys with social emotional learning questions. This one is tricky because unlike the other 2 surveys that are implicated by this bill, this one is not clearly defined. As you know, even social emotional learning is not necessarily clearly defined. So as is always the case, the State Board of Education really values local control. This is one where I think, your LEA could consider developing your own policy defining this. If I were in an LEA, I would want to be able to give training to my teachers. And in order to give that training and to implement policies, I would need to know what is meant by surveys containing social emotional learning questions. So that's something for you to consider, is developing an LEA policy defining this term. USBE does, for your information, have a definition of social emotional learning in a board rule. Can't remember which board rule, but this is that definition. So you're welcome to refer to that in your own policy if you want to, but you're not obligated to. Any questions about that one? Yeah.
So you're saying that the state board has made a decision not to try to define more clearly what SEL means, and that's up to the local LEA.
Yeah, that's a good, did everyone hear that? Again, I'm assuming people can hear the question. Okay, so yeah, I would say, so the board, the elected board, has not weighed in on this necessarily, but they haven't made any indication that they're wanting to explore defining that. And then we've also heard feedback from LEAs that have said, please let us define it. So I don't see any indication that the board is going to define that, which is why I feel confident saying that you're probably best to define it yourselves. Obviously, like, we'll send out information if the board does decide to move in that direction, but I haven't seen any indication of that. Any other questions?
There's a comment online. I've heard a lot about Panorama, but are there other EWS vendors people are using? And then somebody else said they're using Performance Matters in PowerSchool.
Okay, yeah, I have heard of a couple others, but it's primarily Panorama. I can't speak to, I'm not an early warning system specialist, so I don't really know, to be honest. However, I will say that my understanding is that so for this current school year, USBE currently has a contract with Panorama, and then LEAs can sort of like sign on to that contract if they choose to. My understanding is that will remain for the 2024-25 school year. And then USBE is going to do an RFP process to explore other potential vendors to provide that service. So Panorama is not like the end all be all of early warning systems, but it is the currently most commonly used one. All right, any other questions about this, the social emotional learning questions one? Again, I'll just reiterate, if I were a classroom teacher, used to be a classroom teacher, I do think, like, without some clarity on this, you're going to get a lot of questions from teachers. Can I have an exit ticket that asks students about their resiliency on their math assignment? You know, like, without some clarity there, it could be hard to implement this. So again, that's a consideration for you, is defining that at the LEA level. Okay, the school climate survey. So as you may know, the school climate survey, there has until now been a requirement that LEAs administer annually the USBE created school climate survey. This bill changes that. So now LEAs are still invited to, if you want to, you have the opportunity to administer this USBE created school climate survey, but you're not obligated to anymore. And so that's your discretion. I do want to make clear that a lot of LEAs have expressed an interest in continuing to administer that survey. They're finding the data useful in guiding their policies. And so USBE staff are still going to provide support for that. They're still going to administer it once every 2 years and provide other support there. So, and I will also note that there is still a board rule in place that says, this is the actual language, LEA school discipline policies are still required, well, not still, okay, let me tell you when it's quoted. LEA school discipline policies are still required to be, quote, this is the quote from the board rule, informed and updated by data obtained by any regular safety or health related survey, including a school's climate survey as described in this rule, end quote. So you, in order to continue updating those policies, you could, if you decide not to participate in the school climate survey anymore, you might want to, you'll still need to figure out another way to inform those policies based on data. Any questions about school climate survey? Okay, and then just a reminder that this is one of the surveys that requires obtaining consent at the time a student registers for school.
Okay, so back to that. So to that topic of collecting consent, there are different timelines for those 3 specific types of surveys we just talked about. School climate survey, surveys associated with an early warning system, and surveys containing social emotional learning questions. The consent for those surveys needs to be obtained at the time a student registers. Yeah.
If we opt to use the USBE survey, will we still be able to add our own questions at the end?
Yes. And it will still be administered through Qualtrics. For those other protected topic surveys that are not specifically listed, those things will just operate as usual. You need to get parent consent at least 2 weeks in advance. All right, and then this is really important, and I think this is already happening, but I appreciate the legislature's focus on this. A privacy best practice, always, surveys or otherwise, anytime you're collecting information, is to make sure that the people you're collecting information from or the parents who are giving consent are really understand how the data is going to be used. And so the law, the requirement to provide notice has always been in place, but the law kind of tightens up the notice requirement a little bit. So anytime you provide you're collecting consent, you need to accompany that opportunity to provide consent with a notice that explains the following. The survey that will be administered, which my reading of that is that you need to give the parent the actual survey questions. The intended purpose and use for collecting the data, the parent needs to know what they can expect. How is the school going to use this information? The types of persons or government entities that, this is where it gets a little legalese-esque, share the collected data, including people who receive the student level data versus aggregate data, and also anyone who receives the data on a contractual basis. And then the record series that the data fall under. Any questions about notice? Actually, I will preemptively answer a question that we've received a few times, which is, do you have to have a separate notice for each of those 3 surveys? And the answer is yes, because the contents of that notice are going to be different depending on the type of the survey. Okay, a couple notes about collecting consent. The bill is very clear that you may not incentivize a student to participate in a survey, nor can you provide a consequence for them not participating. I don't know to what extent this has been happening in schools, but there's definitely a perception that with the SHARP survey, for example, I've heard a lot of parents say, my kid, they've like basically bribed my kid to take the survey. And we don't want parents to feel like that's going on in schools. So this bill is very clear that you can't say like, oh, thanks for participating in this survey because you did, you get a donut, or you're going to have your grade docked because you did not participate. None of that business. All right. And then this is also really interesting. You cannot collect, the bill is clear that you cannot collect consent, or you can't use consent that was granted at a different school and assume that that consent is still applies to your school.
Same thing with the testing ethics, with the parental exclusion form. A lot of teachers, LEAs think it transfers, it's per school, so.
Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, that's a really interesting comparison. Yes, so if a student is transferring into the school mid-year, you still need to obtain consent at that time, and that's the consent you should honor. Yes?
Is that schools within the same LEA? Or if they're transferring from one school to another inside our district, are we still okay with the consent?
That's a good question. I can't remember the language in the bill. It may have actually said LEA instead of school. Maybe this slide, maybe I was making an assumption here.
That distinction is important.
It is
districts.
It is important, yeah.
At some point.
I'm gonna.
Where it says LEA, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it says LEA.
I think it does too. Now that I think it does say LEA. So this is what I would say. Go check the bill. If it says, if it uses the language LEA, then if a student is moving between schools within an LEA, then you should be good to go. That being said, if a school is administering a different survey than another school, then you still might need to kind of grapple with that. With the example of Panorama, for example, I know there are some school districts that some of the schools use Panorama, some don't. Some of the schools administer the survey as a part of Panorama, some don't. So
it is different. Different LEAs.
Different LEAs. Okay, good. So yeah, it sounds like that's the language of the bill, but I still encourage you to consider that, that nuance, that there might be different things going on at different schools within an LEA.
On the prior slide, I'm just thinking, I oversee federal assessments, and students are selected randomly from schools that are selected randomly, and parents can choose to opt out, or students can choose to opt out if they are selected. It's a sample size of 50 from the school. Some of those schools provide like a thank you, which could be a donut or something. Would that be considered in that rule?
That's a good question. I keep wanting to like repeat the question. The question was, but
You
never
can say
say
it because
Okay, yeah, so the question was, are you talking like the NAEP?
yes.
Yeah, so what about assessments where only a small number of sample students participate, and can you like basically reward them for that? A couple of thoughts come to mind here. First of all, that is not the same as the surveys.
It's because there is a questionnaire portion of, of the assessment.
Oh, okay.
And
Questionnaire
like,
portion
how
of the
many
assessment.
hours do you spend, reading for this class? So there's nothing personal, but questions on topic.
Yeah.
Seems kind of great. So I just want to make sure before the next assessment comes up, so I notify schools like, okay, that's off the table, especially with seniors. Because seniors are really hard to get in, and so they'll do incentives like a free yearbook.
Oh, so they are incentivizing the participation.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, this is what I'll say to that. Kind of two layers. One is, I think your LEA could explore the language and say, well, are we actually incentivizing the participation? Or, you could get into the nuance there. The other thing you could just consider is the appearance of it. Again, like we want parents to feel like we want parents to feel comfortable with the way the schools are behaving. So there is also this world of, like just from a broader policy perspective, regardless of what the bill says, do you want to continue that practice? Is it causing consternation for the families in the school? And then actually I'll add a third thing, which is, again, I'm not totally convinced that what you're describing would be implicated by this bill because it's not one of those 3 specific surveys that are listed, and it probably doesn't contain questions about protected topics.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to point out to the group that the same question that Angela's asking applies to the questionnaire for the ACT.
Yeah, the ACT is, yes, ACT. Yeah, that one, and my understanding is that the ACT that questionnaire asks questions about, or does it still ask questions about religious affiliation?
No, that's no.
Oh, okay, good.
No religious, no political, no family income.
But I like those, could you just vet all of the ones we have though? Assessments, I mean,
We bet
just
them.
give us the results, yeah.
Yeah.
We can tell you for ACT, we ask no questions in the ACT survey that's on the protected class.
Does it ask
that was-
the gender?
But I'm asking that question exactly, and I agree. I mean, it's what used to look different 5 years ago, as of today, is a different kind of thing. I'm just saying it should stop cautiously.
I think we looked at that, and I don't think it even asks male and female or any of that anymore.
I can
For
say that,
ACT.
yeah, for reporting requirements under ESSA, gender is no longer a reporting requirement. So on the school report card, et cetera, we don't report disaggregate by gender. It's not something that, it's not a way that we disaggregate data, especially for public reporting. So we don't use it if it is being asked.
This doesn't answer your question, but it is something that came to mind, which is that there's nothing in the bill that prohibits asking a student's sex. So it's gender identity. We're trying to get away from, obviously asking about a student's gender identity, but you could still ask a student's sex.
I also wonder if this issue is, the ACT survey comes through my ACT students logging into the system. It's not given by the LEA per se. It's the students logging in and registering with their account so that they can get their ACT report, not the LEA seeing. you need to take the survey.
Right, yeah, and this was all a little clearer before USB contracted with the ACT. There was kind of this like, well, a student is taking the ACT of their own volition, you know? So now it is a little bit more to the question that was asked, like there is more, USB needs to be more involved in that. It sounds like
We review it every
Every
single year,
year.
and so it's been, we have,
Okay.
yeah. And in fact, every assessment vendor has changed the word gender off of their test to sex.
Okay.
We did that 2 years ago. That was our big thing 2 years ago, so.
there was, again, to your question, there has been a flurry of conversation about this bill within USBE. People are kind of reassessing, are we in compliance with this law? So I would say we're all trying to be on top of it, but if you ever have questions, let us know. That being said, we would not vet a survey. Like if you were like, will you look at this and make sure it's okay? I'll tell you right now that we're going to say no. We'll say you can ask your legal counsel if you want to, but staff isn't going to do that. But first up that we're administering, yeah, we'll do that. Yes.
Will there be any examples or model wording that we could use as we're designing our registration process to make sure that we're including the right words?
Yes, I'm happy to say there will be. A while ago, we were kind of on the fence about that, but the answer is yes, and I'll get to that in a slide in just a second. To the question about collecting consent after registration, so I think the next slide. This is a tricky one, especially for this upcoming school year, because in many LEAs, registration is either done or almost done. So what is that going to look like? And the answer is we're not really sure yet. And the even more honest answer is USBE is probably not going to tell you how to handle it this year. We're going to administer a little bit of guidance, but it'll be vague on this front. So your LEA is going to need to figure out how do you want to handle surveys that you're going to administer, that you'd like to administer this year, but registration already happened for the majority of your students, and so you didn't have the opportunity to collect consent at that time. That's something you're going to need to grapple with, how you want to handle that. For future years, I think it would be clear to say the bill as written says doesn't appear to allow for like an opportunity to collect consent after the fact. There's a possibility that USBE might want to seek clarity on that from the sponsor. I don't know if that was the sponsor's intention, is to like basically like shut down any opportunity forever and ever. But as it currently reads, it does not appear that you can collect consent after the fact, unless it's for those 3 surveys. For the general protected topic surveys, again, you can collect consent anytime 2 weeks prior to administration. Okay, next slide. Just really quickly, feel free to I think the next one. Feel free to take a look at this on your own time. This is not probably very applicable to you, but it's a really common question that we get from teachers in particular. There's this balance between, okay, well, I'm not supposed to ask about a student's if they're having any like mental health problems, but I also am supposed to be aware of students who are at risk of self-harm or harming others. And so the bill does speak to this a little bit. This isn't new. This was already in the law before, but it provides some clarity on, well, you can ask questions if you feel like the student is at risk of self-harm or harming others, so long as you're using that information to inform the parent and direct that student to services that can support them. Okay, next one. So the to-do list that we've identified for you is as follows. I'm actually just I think we'll just skip forward. You can take a look at that later if you'd like. And I just want to speak to the extent, to the question that was asked, the extent to which USB will be administering guidance. This has been a big conversation topic among USBE staff. And as you know, there's always this balance between the board telling you what to do and allowing for local control. I think in general, you can, on this one, we're going to lean really heavily on the local control piece. That being said, we want to give you some guidance. And so we're drafting something right now. A lot of it, if I'm being honest, is going to be basically like a restatement of the language, but in like kind of more easy to understand wording. And to some extent, like USB staff has a little bit of better understanding than LEA folks might about the intent of the sponsor, for example. So we'll try to give a little bit of information there. We are also planning on giving example language that you could use for notices for those 3 surveys, those big 3. So you can watch for that. And that will be going out through all of the regular channels once it's ready. I'm guessing probably within the next month. Any questions? Okay, well, this has been fun for me. Thanks for letting me join.
Thank you, Kate. For sharing your expertise.
Happy to do it.
We are ahead of schedule, and as we bring this meeting to a conclusion, and also as we consider the end of the school year, I wanted to take a little bit of time to recognize any of our friends or colleagues who might be leaving our group, retiring as assessment directors or taking other positions. We don't always know who those individuals are, so you could share that information in the chat. I do know Brad Ferguson out of Washington County School District is retiring. I want to acknowledge that. Thank him for his good work. On our team, right now, it looks like we'll be pretty stable going into the next year, but we will lose Rebecca Hatch. Her and her family are moving out of state, if I remember right. And so we will be sad to see her leave.
She's not allowed.
She's not allowed to go.
Can't. Who's your husband working for? Who do I need to reach out to? Why did you ever promote me? Yeah, right.
I think Gary Twitchell is moving to a different position.
Who's that?
Gary Twitchell.
Gary Twitchell is taking another position as well. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
I can't see the chat, but are there other names that are coming in that we could acknowledge publicly?
Jumana's, yeah. But she got a new job, right, Jumana? You got someplace you're going. We were excited to hear you found something.
Oh, Robin Hitchcock and Cass. She's been with us for quite a while. And she's on the meeting today. We acknowledge her as well. Thank her for her service. Okay, well, if there are others we're not aware of, you could share that with us and we could publicly acknowledge them and express gratitude in our June meeting. It's always good, we've talked about this before, but the power of gratitude in our lives is real and it's important. It's the root of all good virtues, I believe. So thank you. Thanks to Emily for doing a good job of managing our meeting despite the power outage that we had for a short period of time. For Amy for sending out our information for the meeting. Thank you. And for our team here for putting your information together and working hard to support our assessment community who supports our students and teachers across the state. So thank you and have a wonderful day.